Good day, my name is Kirsten Dean, and today you are watching another segment of Reclaiming Invisible Disabilities and Impairments as part of the HSRC Connect. Today we are celebrating the 3rd of December, which is National Disability Awareness Day. I'm Kirsten Dean, an intern here at the HSRC, and today I'm here with three very special guests, and they'll introduce themselves. Please take it away, guys.
My name is Ncedwe Mdlulwa, and I'm also working in HSRC, which is Human Sciences Research Council, and I'm working as a PhD research trainee. And also, what's interesting about me is the fact that I'm also a disability activist, and that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Quaid. I'm 26 years old. I'm from Elsies River, and I also have a physical disability. I completed my honors degree in linguistics, and I'm here just to speak about disability in the workplace, in life, in all spheres. Yes.
Hi, my name is Felicia, and I'm a mother of a disabled son. I'm also a master's student doing in religion and theology, and my paper or my thesis that I'll be writing about is on a text, doing a hermeneutical text on 2 Samuel 9 on Mephibosheth, with the focus on disability, and hopefully what I um, produced today would be valuable to this talk.
Thank you, guys. So, I actually want to start this conversation off by talking about a very interesting topic, which is mental health in relation to disabilities, which I think is definitely a topic that people tend to either forget about or not realize that it matters. So, Quaid, I want to start with you. And I want to ask you the question of when it comes to your disability, what does mental health mean to you in relation to your disability and living with one?
It's quite a loaded question, Kristen. I don't think I've realized, or I even myself, I was aware of my own mental health until a very late age. I think probably since last year, when I really just soaked in mental health as to like identifying anxiety, identifying the things that I struggle with, and realizing that it's because of a lot of suppressed emotion, living with disability throughout my life. If I think back on it now, experiences that you'd have, like where you'd be outed or you'd be excluded from certain things or accepted, or on both sides of the spectrum, whether it be positive or negative, it really affects one's mental health, like to a large extent. So I think it's I would say that my mental health and my disability is relative in ways that just affects you when you are facing those things again that you faced as a child. So whether it would be in a societal setting, how am I then in a societal setting? Have I become more extroverted, more introverted? How do I operate in the workplace? How do I operate in my relationships, with friendships, or whatever the case may be? How do I operate that, you know, with my disability as compared to how it affected me in my mental health throughout my life?
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think just also commenting on that, I think it's definitely, as individuals living with disabilities, it's so important for us to check in with ourselves mentally and see, how are we coping with these things. And I think definitely from my experience, when it comes to mental health and disabilities, it really does go hand in hand without us even realizing it. I mean, just using the example of how we view ourselves,
Yeah.
and how that affects your mental health. If you are feeling like, my body's this or my body's that, it's going to put you in such, a dark space. So I think understanding one's disability means also understanding your mental health and your mental state. So now I want to go over to you, Rediwe. So as a researcher in the disability sector, which is so important, I want to know, why do you think it's important to listen to the psychological experiences of people who live with disabilities?
Um, you know, um, for me personally, I feel like it's frustrating. And especially because I'm a disability activist and I believe in the idea of fighting and defending for the rights of people with disabilities. So, and also, I understand that, when there's this, people with disabilities are discriminated against. There's the whole stigma, stereotypes, and these attitudinal barriers or perceptive barriers which needs to be dismantled in the space. So it is really frustrating for me personally, but I think that having such platforms as these, where we have open dialogues and talk about disability and raise awareness, I think that there is a room for transformation, there's a room for revolution, there's a room for us to be world changers, to change these perceptive barriers. So also just to inform researchers within the space that we need to do something about it. We need to have more platforms to talk about disability, to make it more educational in nature, be it's through summits or conferences or in our writing of those articles. We need to talk about disability. So I think communication is the key.
I actually want to ask Felicia, how do you feel being a mother of somebody who lives with a disability? What do you think the importance is about listening to, say, for example, your son, who is Quaid, by the way, for our listeners and watchers? So to you, what does it mean, and how do you pay attention to his experience, for example, psychologically?
Okay, so as a mother, I've obviously watched his life, through different seasons of his life, and I think family support is very important. And then, as a person studying religion and theology, I think spirituality is also very, very important. And so that is what I instilled in him and in the family as well. So we never really treated Quaid differently, but as parents, my husband and I made a special effort to see that Quaid, to watch his life and to watch his mental health, to watch that he's doing okay. Because we would always ask him, how are you doing? Are you okay? And I found that from my experience that he doesn't say everything. So he tells us to a certain extent, but we as parents know that, there are things that he doesn't tell us. And then we just have to keep that communication going. And then just to touch on another aspect, my dad, also in the last part of his life, he became disabled. So he had a loss of limb because of diabetes. And so if I look at the contrast between Quaid and my dad, I see Quaid accepting his disability, because one of the things that he actually said to me is he was supposed to have an operation at just before 21 years old. And he said to us, Mom, what message do I give in society if this is the way that I was born? We've tried to the best of our ability for him to have the operations, but he felt that he had a message for society, and that is the way God perhaps brought this upon, not brought it upon him, but gave him that inside of it, that desire to spread a message, which I think is the message of the gospel as well, our lived realities. And so I think family and God being centered in that family definitely brought positivity to him. Whereas my father, again, when he became disabled, he didn't take it very well, and he died in that state. So that's very important. We actually picked up that difference.
Yeah, I think it's very important to take note of what you just said with regard to Quaid finding also a sense of purpose in his disability, because I think that's something that other people with disabilities often don't know, that they can find their purpose in that, and they have the disability for a reason. And that is to not only create awareness, but to show people that you can be comfortable in your skin no matter how you look, whether you have a disability or not. And there will be challenges. I mean, there's always challenges. I think it's a everyday battle. So yeah, I think that's amazing, and thank you for sharing that. I'm not sure how it feels sitting next to your mom when she talks about it. I get emotional when my mom talks about it. I'm just like, stop. So yeah.
So now I'm just curious now to just ask you, quite in terms of your experiences, how has it been within your exposure in the academic space, and what role has your disability played in this kind of experience that you have within the academic space, as you mentioned that you are in university and you've completed your honors and everything. So maybe reflect a bit more on that.
I think in the tertiary part of my education, of course, going to university, it was more accepted. And I say this like not to um, downplay or to negate the fact that I was in a special needs school, but I think being in a tertiary education, I was able to accept that, even what my mom shared now before, like knowing that okay, this is a purpose, this is what I do. Because I think I was heavy on what message do I send if I'm a person with a disability. So why would I change that? Because then I'm leading towards, or I'm like advocating for disabilities negative and disabilities. But most people can't control the disability. I mean, if you were born with it, if you were in a car accident or whatever the case may be, like you can't change that. So like you need to then accept it, and you need to make the best of what God has given you now to be the light in the world, or in your area, or in your surroundings. So in the academic space, it was more of I like to call it my bildungsromans, my coming of age time, because I could find myself in university and who I am, what I wanted to do really with my life, or rather who I wanted to be in my life in university. I think I'd rather say in an academic space, going from primary school to high school, that was the most difficult, because as a child, you'd always hear that opportunities are limited for you as a disabled person. You're marginalized because I look so, or this or that. And you'd always hear these stories or these chitter chatters, not in the space of a school per se, but just because in that age or that phase that you are in your life, going from primary school to high school, it's about, I don't know, 12, from 12 to 18 maybe. And that side of things in an academic sector was very difficult to like accept and to move through, and like, because in yourself, and because that's the ages where you are trying to see, okay, what am I going to do one day with my career, what am I going to do one day. But if you are surrounded by those type of conversations and connotations of like you're very limited to what you can do. I remember for the longest time my biggest passion was to be an actor, and I wanted to study like theater and film. But then doing my own research, I realized I wouldn't get hired, because not that I wouldn't get hired at all, but there's not much roles because people want a certain look or a certain person, and you'd get rather people who are able bodies to act as people with disabled bodies, but you can't as a disabled person act as an able body. It's impossible. So my spaces would be very limited there. So I think in that sense, it was very like just growing up in that sense, or in that academic sector, that was always the I guess the challenge, or the experience that I had.
That's so insightful.
Since we're on the topic of academics, I'd actually like to ask you, as somebody who's gotten a PhD, I just have to say, how does it feel for you listening to the experiences of somebody with a disability in the academic sector? Like, how does that change your perspective of academics, or influence how you think about it?
Working with people with disabilities, both in the past and in the current situation, in my current employment, I've realized that especially in my past experiences in a different organization, people with disabilities were very it's like there's that level of discrimination, these discriminatory practices. Let's say if you wanna advance in your career or employment, I felt those opportunities were made very limited for them, which was very disheartening on my side, and just to observe all of that. And also I felt like especially in the universities, I felt like they had mistrust of people with disabilities capabilities to advance and to make something for themselves, and also there's a lot of undermining in terms of their natural aptitudes and capabilities. So I felt now in that case, there are opportunities, and I think it's also because of we know even in research that people with disabilities are always amongst the poor of the poorest in our society. So there's this also lack of there's isolation and lack of integration in the society. And I think these are the attitudinal barriers that I felt people with disability have been facing in the academic space. And I wish a lot more talks or something could be done. That's why it has inspired me also to be an activist, and to, I mean, to fight and defend for their rights. And because honestly it's not fair, there's a lot of injustices that are happening. So I mean, people with disabilities, we need to understand that we need to have this approach of the two pillar principle, where you put people first. Because if you understand one thing that the academic space, especially within the disability space, it has taught me about, and awakened my idea of seeing people with disabilities in terms of understanding the human dignity, the human values and everything. So if we can put people first and understand that people are people first before their disabilities, so I think we can at least start somewhere. But otherwise, I feel like we have, although there's some work that's being done within the disability space and as far as disability inclusion is concerned, but I still feel like we still have a long way to go, especially around understanding what disability is. And the whole thing of talking about the social model theory, where we feel like indeed people with disabilities are actually marginalized based on these barriers that needs to be dismantled in the society. So I think that's where my take is and my observations. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome, thank you.
Yes, so I'm also curious to ask you, because you are also a person with a disability and you also work within the disability space. How has that experience been like for you? And also with the whole working in a disability research, I wish you could reflect a bit more on that.
I think that for me, it's always an interesting journey to go on, especially when I decide, okay, now I want to explore this topic when it comes to disabilities. And it always takes me into a space where I have to sit and actually reflect, okay, what's my experience of this topic that I'm choosing?
Yeah.
And also, on the other hand, my experiences lead me or encourage me to explore and research certain aspects when it comes to living with a disability. So I would always pay attention to, my emotional state when it comes to certain experiences. And if I have a strong emotional reaction or feeling towards something, and it's to do with my disability, then I'm like, okay, that's something that definitely needs to be explored. And before making the decision of, okay, I'm going to focus on this topic now, I would go and speak to other individuals with disabilities and see, what's their experience like in terms of that. And I think it's so interesting because a couple of weeks ago we did a workshop at UWC, which was with healthcare workers and individuals living with disabilities. And just using that as an example, being in that space and exchanging our experiences, there were so many things that came up. We were all like it was like a thing of, oh my word, you too? Like you also have that? And that was like the most amazing experience to be a part of. So I think it's definitely about paying attention to my own life and my own experiences, and also, other individuals with disabilities, but also watching people without disabilities and how they interact with us. I think that, yes, it definitely plays a big role. And living with disabilities myself, that is what brought me into this space and made me realize, like, okay, I've actually found my purpose. My purpose is in my skin and outside my skin. So yeah, that's me. So thank you for that. I actually want to go back to Quaid now and talk a bit about the work environment. And I want to know, what are 2 challenges that you have faced in the work environment as somebody with a disability?
I think in my previous employment or experiences, I think a lot of maybe like, I think it's the same issues that maybe we struggled with as the disability. Oh, I can't even remember what it was now. It's called DASA at the time, but we basically explored, like, on campus, like the mobility and the facilities that was available for students that are blind, students who struggle with mobility, and so on and so forth. Like, I think just the accessibility of going into an office, or the accessibility of when there's load shedding, is there like a different plan B for someone who's living with a disability, like physical disability, to get up to the office? I think just in terms of accessibility, perhaps that was maybe one of the challenges. Another challenge, I'd say, mm, I think very in a small form, but it was there, like discrimination because you are disabled. Just in terms of, let's see if you can fit into this company, and if you don't really fit, then we're gonna like work you out, or we're gonna like, we're gonna, start treating you differently from how we treated you in the first few weeks. But I'm still doing the same work, same effort, same things that I did before. Um, yeah, I think just atmosphere in around that. I think maybe, or even just maybe not understanding from their point of view, like understanding how to deal with someone who has a disability, which you can't really blame them for, because of course that's even why we're here, to kind of extend the research and to kind of extend, the understanding of working with people and living with people who has a disability. And to be honest, I really think that starts with like primary school. If we are taught um, how to deal with people who are different. I wish I learned more about mental health actually in primary school, so that I could be more self-aware of that within myself, so that it wouldn't hit me like it hit me last year with a big bang. I could have been more aware of it. So I think for the same reasons, when you are a child walking around in a mall and people are pointing and making fun or whatever the case, it's like it's not their fault, because as in a child mind, you don't understand. So you immediately, when you don't understand, you jump to a space of, I'm gonna make light of the situation, so I'll make fun or poke fun, or I don't understand, so I'm gonna treat it as it's weird. But if I understand something, I can then approach it with an understanding, and whatever my thing is with an understanding, whether I'm gonna be accepting of it, or I'm gonna purposefully do something that's gonna be with malicious intent, then I will carry that out. So I think just in that space, I don't think anybody or anything that in my own experience was ever done with malicious intent towards me. I think it was more so the case of just not understanding and how to deal with things and how we can approach it, a situation. But yeah, that was my two challenges, I'd say, within the workspace.
That's so interesting, and I wanna ask your mom, how do you feel hearing Quaid speak about discrimination, for example, and his experiences as a child with kids laughing and things like that? How does that make you feel?
Firstly, I want to say that I don't really like the term disability, but able differently. And if I could mention quite, we had an instance once when he was younger, I think he was probably 10, and or no, 8, because about 8, and myself and my husband, we took him to the movies, and then it was in Sunland Center, and so most of our like colored people go there to shop and stuff, and so there was 2 kids his age, and they were at the playing section. So they approached him, or they looked at him, and they were laughing. As we were walking past, I saw Quaid's face dropped, but I was watching him the whole time, and then I said to him, "Go to daddy," and I called the boys, and I asked them, "Where's your parents?" And they showed me, but then the father had already seen, and he walked over to us, and I said, it's not your fault that your kids reacted in this way, but I think as people we need to treat each other well, and we need to inform our children how to treat others. And then the father apologized, and I said, it's not your fault, but I just think that we need to teach our children to be more accepting of people who are able differently. And then as I went towards him, I saw that he was crying. And I said, you will never cry again for something like this. This is part of who you are. And I know that he was still little at the time, but I think it was an important moment in his life as well. And I needed to be firm at that point. And I think and I said to him, if you had approached them, if they were laughing at you, you had to go to them and speak to them. Because I think society, I think they think that you are, when they see kids that are disabled or people that are disabled, they immediately think you are also retarded or something. I'm not sure, but I mean, they've got that perception. And so I said, if you had approached them and just speak to them and ask them what is your name and try to befriend them or just make a conversation, I think things would have gone differently for you.
Yeah.
And so out of that moment, there was a lesson. And then straight after that, him and his cousin joined hip hop, which was the best for his confidence building, you know. So I think that the way we approached, or I think it was also just God helping me at the moment to put him on a more confident level about himself. So yeah, I think society definitely, as you said earlier, there's so much more to do in terms of disability, and for society to be made more aware of it, and to actually respond differently. Because, like, I mean, also walking in the malls, people turn their heads for what reason?
Yeah.
You know, so we should be making this a norm, the acceptance of disability. And so that's why my study also has to do with hermeneutic. How does the Bible inform society regarding disability? Because we know in ancient days they were marginalized, they were seen as impediments, they were treated differently. So it's for us now breaking down that thought processes and starting to now accept disabled people, because when you start having a conversation with a person, you see that the person actually has valuable things to bring to the table. You know, and so that's why 2 Samuel 9 is so important for me, because when Mephibosheth was brought to the table, he had value to add to that table, whatever discussions were happening at that time.
Yeah, I think I mean, everything you just said is so interesting, and it just brought me back to the question of mental health and disabilities, just using that situation as an example. You know, I mean, it would have been amazing if Quaid had gone up to those boys and spoken to them. But I think in moments like that, that's the moments we need to be aware of, because the way it affects you so drastically, it's almost paralyzing.
Yes.
When somebody, whether they pointed out your disability, if they pointed out in a negative way, or if they're just asking a question, it's still paralyzing. It still paralyzes me. And I try to like just push through it and be like, no, I'm just gonna like talk about it. But that feeling afterwards, it's almost like post-social anxiety. You feel it in your body after it happens, after that interaction takes place. So I think that things like that, especially parents and caretakers for people with disabilities, it's so important that you guys also hear our experiences when it comes to those things, because I mean, it's not easy. Even the work that I'm doing and the work that Quay does when we do things together on disabilities, I mean, we do it because we want to, because we love it, and we believe our purpose is in that as well. But it's still difficult.
I think as parents, we also experience the marginalization. We also get treated differently by society. So we also get excluded from certain things. So I think in that moment that it may have sounded harsh, but it helped him to gain that confidence and say, I'm also a human being. I also have something important to bring to society. And so I don't perhaps agree with it, the way that I reacted, but I think it was needed for him in that situation. Because if I look at Quaid now, I look at a confident person. And I do know that it is very difficult for disabled people to also gain jobs in society. So, I mean, I've walked a path with Quaid for 2 years, sitting outside job interviews, praying in the parking lot for him to get a job, until he gained a job now, a permanent job. So I think that support as well is very important.
It is. I mean, I can't imagine what I would have done without my mom. And when I listen to her experiences that she'll talk about very rarely when it comes to having to raise me, especially her experiences with doctors. I mean, that's a whole other conversation for a whole other episode. Doctors are, they're something else. So I want to ask you actually, after hearing all these things as a researcher, what research do you think could be done or should be done now to address these challenges, specifically in the workplace, for example? Everything that Quaid spoke about, discrimination and jobs kind of looking at you one way when you start, and as time goes on, you know, it's completely different.
Yeah, that's a good question. And just what comes to my mind right now is the fact that I wish we could have this qualitative um, action participatory research. Yeah, I think it's participatory action research, but it's qualitative in nature, because there we actually look at the subjective views and experiences of people. And what I like about it, it also brings in this idea of collaboration. So for instance, us, let's say in this space, we could even interview and work collaboratively with other people out there who are not doing research, but just to interview and understand their lived experiences. I mean, we're talking about the psychological aspects of things, or the adverse, psychological aspects in terms of how you are treated as a person with a disability. So if we have this qualitative participatory action research, it will allow us to, it will promote the idea of collaboration, and to interview people and get their lived experiences. And us doing so, that will help us also to bring in policymakers, to inform policymakers, and to raise awareness about, let's say, the issues of stigma and stereotypes, and how they lead to either depression or anxiety, and all this emotional turmoil that people with disabilities face. So definitely, I think it should be that kind of a research that's participatory in nature, that involves a lot of actionable steps in dealing with and dismantling these perceptive barriers or other types of barriers that people that are imposed on people with disabilities. So I think for me, that's the kind of or the type of research that I would recommend. But I'll also, because I believe we're all also researchers, you also mentioned as a parent that you're also doing your master's, and you're also into the postgraduate space. So I would love also to pose that question back to all of us, to all of you, also just to share what type of research you think perhaps could be done, that will be impactful to deal with these challenges that people with disabilities are facing, or that are imposed upon. Yeah. Maybe quite.
I think like as I mentioned before, the like being in a primary school setting and those type of research, I think really just understanding the differences, the different type of disabilities, the different type of mental health. I think having it more on a mainstream level. I think we have these conversations, and it's good. Like when I sit in, or when I'm fortunate enough to be a part of a conversation like this, like it's always in an academic setting. So that means people that aren't in a tertiary in mode or studying, or they don't work as a lecturer or whatever, they don't get this opportunity to sit in a conversation like this. Because it always gives me goosebumps whether I'm sitting or participating, like just listening and sitting. And I think people really benefit a lot from having these conversations as a form of content, like content creation. If that's what's trending these days, then let's make that a thing. Or let's have more talks like this on Instagram Live, Facebook Live, and things. I think myself and Kirsten did a IG Live, like was it a year, maybe 2 ago?
It could be 3 years ago.
Wow.
Actually, it's been
But it was such an interactive one, where we didn't expect it to like go off like it. But I mean, it wasn't a lot of people. Maybe it was like under 50, but like those who did join, they were very interactive and engaging. And it wasn't people that was, very academically inclined. It was people that were just socially online. It was lockdown, of course, but so of course everybody was like tuned in, because you have nothing else to do. But I personally believe till this day that conversation like changed a lot of people's perception on disabilities, and it allowed people to like open their minds to more of that. So I feel in an academic space or more research space, I think looking into what we can do, what platforms we can use to allow disability, or to make disability awareness more prevalent in society, so that whatever perception is like perpetuated around, it's not always negative. Because I'll be frank, as someone that's living with disability, there is a negative side to it, and there's a positive side to it. So we can't ignore either or. We have to take it in as a full experience, because at the end of the day, like whether it's negative or positive, it's an experience, and an experience can always turn into a great story. So I feel like that is what we really need to push.
Yeah. Wow.
I actually think that that is the perfect way for us to wrap it up. As Quaid said, an experience is a story. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in and watching. I hope that you all celebrate Disability Awareness Day, start those conversations, ask those questions, just really connect with people living with disabilities and, get to know each other, educate yourselves. So thank you guys, and yeah, enjoy National Disability Awareness Day.